Hello and welcome to another episode of Pierce versus Maguire. I'm Andrew Pierce from the Daily Mail. He's my sparring partner from the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire. We've been sparring for many, many years, and we rarely agree and disagree. And I suspect we're about to disagree because the great question this week is Margaret Thatcher. It was the 100th anniversary of her birth on Monday, an historic occasion causing me to bow reverentially in the very thought of her. There was a major dinner at the Guildhall to mark the occasion, attended by the great and the good.
Bit early, it's not Halloween, and for a while.
The great and the good, which means Kevin Maguire wasn't invited. I was. The reason I wasn't there, I'll tell you later. But Maguire, even you will concede, in terms of the 20th century political leaders, prime ministers, Margaret Thatcher was one of the most consequential of the 20th century.
Consequential, I'll give you, because there were huge consequences. She was the first female Prime Minister, which is a major landmark.
Yeah, how's Labour getting on with that?
She was a disaster.
How's Labour getting
disaster? And many of the problems in contemporary Britain stem from her premiership. That was 11 long, nasty years of deindustrialisation, mass unemployment, flogging off the family silver at bargain basement prices to her mates, not replacing council houses when they were sold, massive period of division, awful confrontations like riots in Brixton and Liverpool in 1981, the miners' strike when the full weight of the state was deployed against communities in the north of England, Scotland and Wales. You can't forget the Falklands War, where people died. That was a diplomatic disaster for her. She somehow turned into a military triumph, but it should never have happened in the first place because all the wrong signals were sent to the junta in Argentina. No, it was a terrible period, a really nasty period. And I know you put her on your pedestal. I know you have this bizarre shrine to her in your room.
There it is. What do you mean? You've been in it.
I know, and I was terrified.
And you were bowing and scraping, and I locked you in. I locked you in.
I was shouting defiance, and I was terrified.
Now, you clearly like Mrs. Thatcher after that incredibly intemperate rant. Why do you think then she won an historic 3 general elections? If she was so reviled, so hated, so unpopular, did so much damage to the country. She won in 1979 with a majority of about 46, in 1983 a majority of 148, and then she won again in 1987 with a majority of over 100. An extraordinary achievement, not matched anywhere else in Europe until that point.
She had a Tory right-wing press which was utterly dominant behind her at the time.
She had the right solutions.
At the time, and look, I think a lot of people would regret now when they look back at her reign or her misreign.
Kevin Maguire, you're really saying Margaret Thatcher won an historic hat-trick of general election victories because the print media got behind it?
In part, yeah, because Labour was torn to shreds every single day, not just at election times, every single day.
Was that possibly because Michael Foot was probably the worst leader of the opposition who fought the election in 1983 since the Second World War?
He got a lot more seats than Rishi Sunak
But was he the worst leader? I'm talking to that point.
Worst leader of the opposition? No. I mean, Ian Duncan Smith as the Tory leader was far worse.
Right.
He struggled to adapt. There's no question.
When Margaret Thatcher became leader, we had a nationalised coach company, a nationalised airline. The banks were state. You couldn't take more than 50 quid out of the country on your annual holidays. The country was on its knees, and she rescued it. She dragged it up by the scruff of its neck by sheer force of personality. Not rubbish, Kevin. And we went from the sick man of Europe to the envy of the world, and her privatisation was copied all around the world. And Kevin, hang on, you had your say. Thatcherism was born, and an ism. It was the first ism, and then we had Blairism after that. The second, well, I suppose you put Clem Attlee was the great consequential post-war leader too.
Meaningful.
Blair afterwards. Blairism. Thatcherism was exported all around the world.
With your privatisation mania, we're still paying the price now of her water and energy privatisations in higher bills for, certainly in water, sewage in rivers and the seas and energy. It's a disaster.
Wrong?
We're paying a price.
What went wrong with the great privatisations was called Tony Blair, because under the thrall of the European Union, which cracked the whip. So, of course, Blair jumped. How high do you want to jump? Because we all know he wanted to become the president of the commission. They said, you can forget these golden shares to protect these former nationalised utilities, because part of the free market in Europe, hang on, Kevin, we must be able to bid for these. So in piled the French, in piled the Spanish. Thank you, Tony Blair.
She was a big European.
Thank you, Tony Blair.
She was a big European.
She gets the blame. Her privatisations were designed to stop that happening, but Blair surrendered to Brussels like he did on everything else, Kevin.
The 70s weren't perfect by any
the 3-day week, the dead not being buried.
I think you'll find the 3-day week was under Ted Heath.
The 70s, you talked about the 70s. Yeah, but Ted Heath was no Tory. That's why they brought her in.
Was at its most equal and fairest in the mid-1970s.
Yeah.
And real wages were going up. And people had jobs that they had a pride in and they held. And unemployment was a fraction when Labour supposedly wasn't working than what it was under Margaret Thatcher when it topped 3 million
and
with,
then came down.
A recession.
And then came down. And then unemployment came down.
And then it went back up again to 3 million.
And then remarkably, Kevin,
when she was kicked out by her own side after the poll tax madness.
And who won the general election after that? Not your lot. The Tories won again. Yeah. So they obviously they were sick of her. They were sick of her, but they weren't sick of the Tories.
Sadly for the country.
Because the Tories had the answers. And these days, Blair was a huge admirer of Margaret Thatcher's, as you know.
No, I met her like you. Probably you met her more. And I went to a Christmas party with my little daughter in the House of Commons. I remember Thatcher came up and said, "Oh, what lovely threading! Oh, this stitching on her dress." And I just crossed my fingers and I thought, look, my child has had all her jabs. She'll be all right. Coming across Thatcher like this.
You left
but
it. Do you know the great story about Harriet Harman? Harriet Harman had only just won a by-election. Harriet Harman, who never did become Labour leader, but was acting Labour leader, I think, for a while, and was deputy leader of the Labour Party. When she'd had a baby and she took the baby into the division lobby, Mrs. Thatcher comes scuttling over. So Harriet Harman had to make this decision. Oh, my God. Do I allow my daughter to meet Britain's first woman Prime Minister, of which Harman would respect her for that? Or do I run a mile? What did she do? She ran a flipping mile.
Harriet Harman subsequently left her out of a list of prominent British women, which I thought was a mistake.
It was a scoop for me when I was on the Daily Telegraph, and they had to issue an apology. What she did, prominent women in post-war Britain, and it said February 1975. Woman elected leader of the Conservative Party. 1979, woman elected British Prime Minister. She couldn't bring herself to use the name. And that was a taxpayer-funded exercise. But why does the left hate her still so much? Because they're envious of her success and they're envious of her stature and her reputation.
It's the damage she inflicted on communities and people's lives. That's why.
Sadly.
I'm sorry, I just do not believe... value in the city and the big bang and money making, people like Nigel Farage, bizarrely, over people who were making the things
financial
in
services,
factories and manufacturing.
Financial services is now a major employer. And my dad worked in a factory. It was a hard life, and I wished he hadn't had to do that job till he was 64 because it was too hard. It was a job he was doing when he was 34, too tough. Your dad worked down the mines. You wouldn't want people to be going down the mines now, Kevin, would you?
No, but I want those jobs replaced before they go. No, I had a brother who was through the through the pit strike, the 84-85 pit strike, which was probably the nearest we came to a civil war, and it was terrible police oppression. No. Look, memories are long in many communities about her, and I know everyone down the Guildhall, all her fan club want to go along and cheer her and drink champagne, and I'm afraid that was the unequal Britain she was creating.
Dear listeners, have to tell a confession. Kevin Maguire insisted on having a photograph taken in my Thatcher shrine. Yeah. He insisted. I was a bit worried he might steal something from the Thatcher shrine. And do you know what's in that Thatcher shrine? There's a dried rose, blue, obviously, from a vase that was in her house on the day of her funeral. It was
Oh.
given to me
Yeah,
by
all
her
right,
daughter,
I'm not-
Carol. I didn't
yeah.
steal it. I didn't pinch it.
No.
I was given it.
Well, if Carol's given it, if the daughter of a woman who's died has given you that, I
Yeah.
will.
And the reason I
respect
wasn't
that.
on the top table at the Thatcher banquet at the Guildhall, 600 people there to mark the 100th anniversary of her birth. She still got huge pulling power.
Isn't that
Kevin.
a problem for you, though, on the right in the Tory party? You're living in the past.
No.
She cast a long shadow, and you
No.
can't escape her.
Well, you lot can't escape Blair, the most successful prime minister you ever had.
On the left, we always say we stand on the shoulders of giants, people who, whether they're the Tolpuddle martyrs.
Anyway,
or
listen, I'm
others.
going to do a plug. The reason was because I was at Cheltenham Literature
Shameless.
Festival plugging my
Utterly-
book.
utterly
And there is a
shameless.
great story in here about me and Mrs. Thatcher and lunch at the Ritz. Shall I share it with you?
I
I don't think you've ever had lunch. Have you ever had lunch at the Ritz, Kevin?
No, but what
I didn't
what
think
I
so.
What I can't believe, though, is you go to find your birth mother and she's called Margaret.
I know. you
I just
couldn't make it
can't.
up. I know. And I had to say to a number of Labour MPs who said, "Oh, you've written a book about finding Margaret Thatcher. Who cares?" I said, "Think again." Anyway, I took Mrs. T.
You're
to
going to tell
lunch.
me anyway, aren't
I'm
you?
going to tell you.
Everybody
I
listening,
took
I'm
Mrs.
sorry, he's
T.
going to tell you.
I took Lady
Make a
T.
cup of tea now.
to
Just
lunch
come back in a bit and it'll
at
be
the
over.
Ritz, and it was in her, shall we say, declining years.
Yeah.
And she linked my arm with hers, and as we walked out, the pianist was playing A Nightingale in Berkeley Square, and she said, "Do you know, dear, that was mine and Dennis's favourite." I did know, which was why the pianist was playing it. So that's a nice story.
It is a
Kevin.
nice story. Look, in our declining years, when dementia was taking a hold and she was very frail, I had huge sympathy for her, and I kind of never forgive Meryl Streep playing the Iron Lady in that, and you're just watching a woman decline, and just human-wise, I might have detested her when she was Prime Minister, but later in life, you just felt a sympathy. I used to do a Radio 4 series, and it was called The World According to Kevin Maguire.
Oh, my God. What sort of world would that be?
And I went to see Thatcher after she was Prime Minister in Romford, where Andrew Rossendale, very right-wing Tory MP.
His office is called Margaret Thatcher House.
Real flag waver, had his bulldog and a Union Jack waistcoat. And I was waiting for her to arrive, ask some sharp questions. And she came, and she was so frail. I didn't have the heart to do it.
I think she blew her brain with the extraordinary pace. And we just have to mention, of course, that extraordinary story in the Times this week.
Well, I was going to ask you, is she a
based on
shagger?
a book.
Is Margaret Thatcher a shagger?
This book alleges she had an affair with a man most people never heard of, called Sir Humphrey Atkins, who was one of her cabinet ministers, and an affair with an unnamed person too. When would Margaret Thatcher have had time to have an affair? She famously survived on 4 hours sleep. She was also had a very Methodist view of the world. She was a devout Methodist. She was devoted to Dennis. It's absurd.
Well,
And the people I've talked to around her have just laughed out loud. They're not giving it, they're not even taking it, they're not outraged. They just think it is so incredulous.
this is The Incidental Feminist by an author called Tina Gowden.
Never heard of her.
Anyway, I always thought, well, Thatcher, she had 2 children, so she had sex at least once because they were twins.
They were.
I must admit, they weren't. I was in Parliament like you. There were very few rumours, and this is based on rumours.
Yeah.
And some of the rumours go around, and they're baseless.
And also, everybody's dead, so you can't defame anybody.
And Charles Moore, Lord Snooty, who's our official biographer, said he'd heard the rumour and can find no evidence for it. And I actually think he'd rather it wasn't true, but if it was true, I do believe.
I think he'd have written it.
So do I.
Yeah, because he's a proper journalist, proper welfare. And also, I heard that story about Humphrey Atkins 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And she'd heard this rumours and laughed out loud. I repeat again, when would she get time? And also, she loved Dennis to bits.
Yeah, and he seems to have been close, according to this book, to
Mandy Rice Davis. She was the one who famously said in the
affair,
Profumo court case, when somebody denied having sex with her, Profumo, or whoever it was, or the Russian attaché, well, he would say that, wouldn't he?
Look, neither of us is a bishop. Would it make any difference if she had an affair? I know you're jumping.
So.
Would it be because she was all family, no such thing as society, just family, so there'd be a terrible hypocrisy?
Yeah, and it's Kevin, I didn't know her the way others know her, but it's just absurd.
I kind of agree, and I'll put a little asterisk with T and C's apply, and I will just say John Major, Edwina Currie.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have put his relationship with Dennis, that Margaret Thatcher and Dennis's relationship in the same way as John and Norma's. And he was in London a lot. Norma was in Huntingdon. Dennis and Margaret Thatcher, when she was a minister, lived in Flood Street in Chelsea in a very nice house. And then they were in Downing Street. they weren't apart in the way that John Major and Norma Major were. And as you know, that is often what happens with MPs, because constituency is one part of the country and they're in London.
Yeah.
And and of course, Edwina was a Derbyshire MP, so she was here, her husband was away. It's because, Kevin, just to remind you what's in the shrine there, there's a photograph of me interviewing Mrs. Thatcher during one of the elections. The photograph at the very back is when she came to the Daily Telegraph. That is on the 30th anniversary of her election victory. So that's 1999.
Nothing weird about this. Nothing weird.
No. There's various mugs with her face on. The photograph on the right is on my 40th birthday. Yeah. Happy birthday, Andrew. Margaret Thatcher. There's the rose, of course, too. Yeah. And the little coffee cups are from Margaret Thatcher's house and were given to me by Carol Thatcher. Really? So obviously they are very precious. And there may be a rumour that my partner broke one. That went down very well. And on the 30th anniversary of my career in journalism, there's a letter in the corner from Mrs. Thatcher saying, I gather this is a very important anniversary. You've broken some I was over the moon.
Have you ever seen an Alan Partridge?
Oh, and the photograph and the picture at the top. Is an original worth thousands.
Yeah. Oh, really? There we are.
And I bought it.
But have you ever seen the Alan Partridge episode when Steve Coogan, Alan Partridge,
don't
goes to the house of his super fan and who has a room full of cutouts and pictures of him? I'm just,
don't do Steve Coogan.
I'm just,
you've got blimmin' Lenin or Trotsky in your house, haven't you?
No, I think you'll find that's a bust of Marx, actually. But nevertheless,
there we are. Bust of Marx.
There we are.
Now, let's talk about the far left. China is a Chinese
state capitalist authoritarian.
When is a Chinese whisper a legal fact? So it primes his questions. The first one today, this week, since Parliament returned after the thrilling party conference season. Badenoch, I thought, was in one of her more effective performances. She drilled down, almost in a lawyerly-like way. She's the engineer, Keir Starmer is the lawyer, about the court case that collapsed. This was involving two men accused of being spies for China. One was a teacher, one had worked for the Tory MP Alicia Kearns. All sorts of people have come out of the woodwork to say the government deliberately collapsed, and it's all over whether China was seen as an enemy of the state.
Which it wasn't at the time.
Well,
and I remember.
Many Tories say that they're just saying that the Prime Minister is lying.
I remember it was not at the time of the Conservative government, because we're talking 2021 to 23.
Yeah, well, there was a national security review published in 2022 by the Tories where they called China an enemy of the state.
They were going to be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act, which now has been superseded by the National Security Act, which closes these loopholes. Look, I watched that performance by her, and incidentally, Labour and the Conservatives didn't get bouncers in the polls from their party conferences. The Greens have had something of bounce under Zach Polanski, the eco-socialist, but they didn't. If I was Badenoch, I'd have gone on cost of living. It's a much bigger issue.
I agree.
And the Chancellor's in trouble. She said, "Look, we're going to be looking at tax rises and
inflation's going up again, unemployment's gone up again."
So I think she went on it, but she did go on it. You're right. She went on China, but I don't think she landed a blow, because he preempted it by saying he will publish the witness statements from the people that were going to give evidence in the court before.
Forgive me. He actually said at one point, "Well, I'll check. I'll go back and check." Shouldn't he know?
No.
He's got civil servants everywhere and China experts everywhere in the Foreign Office, and he's got officials behind him. He's got officials in the box, the Whitehall box. He's
got to make sure when he says no ministers or special advisors had any role in the.
Don't you think he should have known that 100%?
I think he is pretty confident. You're right.
He should be confident.
But the problem if you're Prime Minister or you're Secretary of State is the information you're given accurate, and that's something being overlooked. So he's leaving himself a little cat flap just in case he's got it wrong. It'd be very embarrassing if he had. But look, she'd be pre-prepared her questions. I thought the bigger blows were when she said, what's the point of having a lawyer as a leader? And he said, well, you're not neither a lawyer nor a leader. And when she said, what's everybody laughing at? And somebody shouted, you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, it's not core. I think it's just not. I like a good spy story. I love a John le Carré thriller.
It hasn't caught.
But it hasn't, because it's very complicated. It's all happened on the Conservatives' watch.
And also,
but then it's dropped under Labour. But unless you show politicians have pulled the plug.
But it was a better story when we were in the Cold War.
Yes,
when we had Russian spies and entrapments and honey traps and all that sort of thing. But I think she's right to keep pushing away, because there is a bit of nervousness amongst some Labour MPs. Is everything right with this?
I think she believes.
Andrew Neil wrote a very powerful piece this week saying he thinks they're lying.
Yeah,
that the Labour and what they're saying is no ministers were involved, but were officials involved. Kevin. Was Jonathan Powell the National Security Advisor? Was he involved?
Well, officials had to give statements, so they were involved to some extent.
But was he the reason the case was collapsed?
But the statements weren't strong enough on the position with China at the time the alleged offences happened, which is. If you commit a driving offence, it's applied on the law at the time. You can't say, "Oh, the future law changes, so I'm going to go back to that old offence." It just doesn't work like that. And I think she believes she's found her party gate, which brought down Boris Johnson over the line. I think it's more likely going to be Beergate, when Keir Starmer was accused of breaking the law in Durham and he didn't. So she can bang on as much as she likes. And I may be wrong. I may be surprised down the line, but I just don't feel this is the great scandal that she is trying to make it out for purposes that are political, which are really understandable. I get it. It's dogs and lampposts, isn't it? I mean, that's what they do in politics. But I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure.
Now, another anniversary. We were talking about the Thatcher anniversary. We saw in court this week the Afghan asylum seeker jailed for trying to or threatening to kill Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, unlike other MPs who've been threatened with violence and go quietly, Nigel hasn't gone quietly, because he says this man will be out free in less than 5 years. He got 5 years, which means to be out in 2.5. But this is also the anniversary, of course, this week of the murder of David Amess, Sir David Amess, who was the MP of Southend, Tory MP. You and I knew him for years. I knew him particularly well, fellow Catholic, one of the most mild-mannered MPs. Are our MPs secure enough?
No, I think we're in a... MP,
I mean, he was stabbed to death in his constituency surgery. Jo Cox, in 2016 during the referendum, stabbed on her way to her constituency office by a far-right fanatic.
Yeah, a neo-Nazi then, an Islamist fanatic. David Amess. There are cases pending with people over Ed Davey.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister himself, his family home was firebombed.
I think there was an issue with Angela Rayner, wasn't there?
Yes, another stalker. They have, Spencer Perceval was a Prime Minister assassinated in 1812.
Yeah.
We know during the troubles in Northern Ireland, the Civil War, the uprising, insurrection, whatever you want to call it, MPs were killed then. They came very close
They tried to blow up Margaret Thatcher and
very close to assassinating her.
5 people were killed in the Brighton bomb in 1984.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think in the current period, it's there's more hate and anger, and there's an atomization of the country where people are doing their own thing much more, not collectively control, and it spreads online. And look, this guy who's got 5 years, and quite rightly, records a video and puts it on social media, threatening to kill Nigel Farage. I understand why he's really he's unhappy because he feels insecure. And I get it, and of course the court sided with him. Now this guy should be deported when he's out of prison. But no, I mean these threats are coming too thick and fast.
They are, and of course social media I think has made it a lot worse. But also, I mean, what do we do about MPs? Do we stop them doing constituency surgeries? It's essential that they carry on doing that. But do they, if they advertise them in advance, is that then an invitation for the lunatic?
Well, I think they have invitations now, but that doesn't mean somebody can't get an invitation and come in and attack you. I mean, Nigel Farage wrongly claimed he'd been advised on security grounds not to hold surgeries in Clacton. That turned out not to be true.
But in my local paper, there are regular advertisements for one of the local MPs to do his constituency surgery. He is called Sir Keir Starmer. So he is still... Now, whether he does it in person or he's got his people doing it, but I know when we're going back to Thatcher, she took great pride in doing her surgeries in Finchley once a fortnight.
Yeah, well...
Mind, she didn't have a very big majority either.
And it's a great part of British democracy that our politicians are accessible. But the more you get extremists or people who are mentally ill, whatever, troubled, fanatics, threatening them and attacking them, they're going to withdraw. There's going to be more and more security. And I think we'll lose something. And I don't know what the answer is, but I think if MPs stop doing surgeries, I think that would be a backward step.
I do too. Now, one of the rising stars of the Labour benches, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, won't do any good when people are saying she's seen as a future leader. I think it's the kiss of death, don't you?
The latest future leader.
The latest future. I mean, there's been quite a long list. She's now, has she done herself any favours? Is she saying the bleeding obvious? This country has lost control of its borders, and that she says that means there's a loss of respect, a loss of credibility. She was holding a meeting with Balkan leaders there. What a waste of time that is. Stop the boats, love. That's what they're supposed to do. Cut legal migration too.
Right. On the question of stop the boats, you don't just stop them at Dover.
Oh, no, they were going to smash the gangs, weren't they, Kevin?
Yeah, you have to go.
Do you know, I'd almost forgotten that was a slogan. How many times did they say that in the election campaign?
You have to go.
Smash the gangs.
You have to go to the supply routes.
Smash the gangs.
The sources. That's what you do.
Smash the gangs.
It's like forward defence. One of Rishi Sunak's successors on boats was he did a deal with Albania to return people to Cape. I think it was about 10,000 people and stop the float. So that
smash
works.
the gangs.
But I think she's wrong. Britain hasn't lost control of its borders.
What?
We haven't lost control.
Every time they cross the channel, it's another sign, and they're cocking a snook, and they're shouting, "Thank you, Keir! Thumbs up to the cameras, thanks, Keir!"
And they are picked up. You would lose control,
and then they disappear. Then they disappear into the black economy.
Control of your borders if people came in without being detected.
I'd put them in detention centres behind barbed wire.
I think
I'd put them in detention centres behind barbed wire. No, none of these hotels. Get them out of hotels. Too expensive. Detention centres. Barbed wire.
Yeah, well, we'll have one.
That's what they do in Denmark.
We'll have one of these detention centres in Hampstead.
That's what they do in Denmark.
On the heath next to your house.
No, we put them in the middle of the countryside.
Let's
put them in the middle of the countryside.
Let's not be inhuman to women and children who have fled sometimes terror.
France. They fled
poverty,
France.
No, but they've
fled
they've
Calais.
Suffered terribly to get there.
They have fled
And if you're
Calais.
in a camp in Calais, living in woods in a tent, it's a pretty bad situation. Now, I'm not saying everybody who comes across should be allowed to stay. If you're an economic migrant, I'm sorry, it's tough. People like me on left don't normally like talking about deportations, but you've got to have a system that works. But if people are fleeing terror and persecution, then I think they should be welcome. And we say refugees are welcome here.
She is changing the language. She is deliberately using reform-esque language to try and put back the reform
and
wars.
I think it's regrettable. The Prime Minister himself has said the Conservatives had an experiment in open borders. No, they didn't.
Your Prime Minister described this as an island of strangers.
Yeah, and I'm glad
straight from the Enoch Powell.
It was disgraceful. You might have applauded. You might have cheered. I jeered. And
she's adopting the same language, and that's why I put her in the job.
And I think it's
because she's a Muslim. Because she's a Muslim, he thinks she can get away with it.
It's dangerous.
Isn't it cynical, Kevin?
There is a cynicism. Yeah, there is, and I wouldn't do it. I wish she wouldn't do it. I'll criticise it when she does it. I'll do it again.
And of course,
I'm losing my voice.
I actually good. That's a relief for all of us. And of course,
so rude.
The people who talk up her leadership prospects, she's got no chance being Labour leader using that sort of rhetoric because Labour Party members hate that sort of language.
I think a lot of the country does.
I
think they're misjudging it. If you look at Farage, he might be on. Excuse me, I'm dying now. Farage might be on 30-odd%. 70% of the country don't like him. Well, I think if the Conservatives think it being Trump and the ICE team sweeping up migrants in the US will be popular here, they're ignoring the unpopularity in the US because legal American citizens are being detained arbitrarily and sent out of the country. There's a reaction against it.
Yeah. Last big story, Ken, we've got to talk about because we talked about it last week. He's now.
Well, I don't want to die in the meantime. Yeah.
Well, if you die, I am not giving the kiss of life under any circumstances.
Can I just say you're banned from your funeral as well? I just want that on the record.
Well,
just in case.
If I'm not there, there'll be nobody else there. Now, the big story. We know you're a great fan of Donald Trump's. We talked about the Nobel Peace Prize. will it hold? And what about his plan that peace in Iran and more war with Ukraine, giving Ukraine long-range missiles? I mean, he was revered in that Israeli parliament. It was extraordinary. I mean, it was the greatest loving.
Yeah, I think that some Israelis will be cheering him, others will be frightened of him because we know,
But
it's a very extremist country.
Look, well, since the last ceasefire ended, I checked, 16,000 people died in Gaza. 16,000. This ceasefire holds for 2 or 3 months. That's going to save thousands of lives.
All right, I will ask, why didn't he do it earlier?
Well,
because he could have. He's changed. I hope it holds. It's a colonial, very imperialist solution. When the peace board with him, Tony Blair of Iraq on it, you've got to wonder. The Palestinians in the end will have to decide their future and shape it, and hopefully peacefully and prosperously with their neighbour Israel. But where is the two-state solution, which is the only long-term?
Well,
long-term
let's not
solution.
forget, Hamas is implacably opposed to a two-state solution.
Yeah, well, Hamas is down but not completely out. But it's not what it was. And look, you got to look around the world, and you got to think. Say Germany at the end of the Second World War, the denazification program. You can build a new country out of ruins.
You can, but Kevin, what about the young men who've been radicalised by this war? So I've got a great mate who's a doctor. He's Palestinian. He's going back there next week. He works in the hospital 1 week every month, the only hospital that's still standing in Gaza. Yeah. And he's going to be heavily involved in prosthetic limbs for children.
Yeah.
And he's treating one child, a family of 13. He's the only one left. They're all dead.
Horrific.
And this boy is 15. He hates Israeli people.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of understand the animosity on both sides.
And you think at some point...
Yeah, after the Hamas pogrom and the Nova Music Festival...
If they don't de-arm Hamas, those guns will be going in the hands of young men like that.
If you don't de-arm Hamas and you don't stop Israeli settler violence or the Israeli state unleashing ethnic cleansing, genocide, war crimes, however you wish to characterize it. Look, this conflict didn't come out of the blue 2 years ago, but if you want a solution, you've got to get two warring groups to cease to be at war. Is Trump capable of doing that? I'd genuinely hope he is, but you doubt he is, not least because he's probably going to come down on one side and he's talked about moving 2 million people out of Gaza to have Trump Gaza.
Yeah, no, he's not talking about that now. He's moved on from that.
Well, this is where he jumps around. Yeah. What's his attention span? Yeah. I think Ukraine is a noble cause. I think peace in the Middle East is a noble cause. But his attention span, how long will it last?
He wants the Nobel Peace Prize. His mate won it in Venezuela. They are good mates. The woman who won it in Venezuela. He wants it next, so that's why he's going to continue. Not for entirely noble reasons, but he does want the Nobel Peace Prize. And frankly, Obama got it for doing nout.
No, Obama got it for not invading anywhere, actually.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. But Trump's not invaded anyway.
No, but he has attacked Iran.
Yeah.
When he said he wouldn't.
Well, I think probably effectively.
And he did continue arming, as the UK did to a much more limited extent, Israel. So there is a complicity in what has happened in Gaza.
And the last thought on Trump. Oh my God, that moment when he seemed to invite our British Prime Minister to the microphone at the special peace conference in Sharm el Sheikh, and Starmer looked all Jack the lad, and then he abruptly turned his back on him and he went back into the line like a naughty schoolboy. And Starmer has to learn a way of looking. He looked humiliated because, Kevin, he was.
Well, it was like the head teacher saying to the head boy, "Come forward, step back now, please."
Clear off. Without even getting a chance to open his mouth.
Yeah, off you go. No, it was
car crash moment.
But it is interesting though. It's a very unlikely bromance, and I think this is the one occasion when Starmer genuinely puts country before party, because his party would love him to turn on Trump, shred him, and it sticks in my throat to say it. I've stopped coughing now, but it sticks in my throat.
So
it's better to have a relationship with him than to just rubbish him, which is what I would want to do.
Now, I know you're a Morrisons man.
I like Morrisons.
Of course you do. We don't have one in my part of North London.
I bet you don't.
We don't.
Yeah,
no.
I bet you don't.
We have a very nice Waitrose.
We do up in the
northeast. And we
northeast.
have this very nice food range called Charlie Bigham or Bagham. Anyway.
Is it Bingham?
Bingham.
Bingham? I don't know.
Well, actually, I think it's Big Ham, but everybody calls it Bingham.
Mm.
He is introducing a new fast food range for two. Beef Wellington. How much do you think? For two?
Tenner.
It's not Morrisons, dear. It's Waitrose.
Actually, I could probably get it for £5 out there, actually. Use me Morrisons card, get me points.
I've got to say, it's $29.95. So in other words, £30. Now, there was a time, Kevin, when you and I could go to a curry house and have a decent curry and a pint each and a couple of pompadons thrown in. That is now for a fast food dinner which you put in the oven for 20 minutes. It's not the microwave, of course. But do you think people are going to pay that?
I hope not.
$29.95.
I could get 7 pints in the Rockcliffe Arms for that. I mean, rather than having one of his beef ones. Now, if you splash out, I know there's a cost of living crisis. Yes. If you splash out, you get it. Invite us round. I'll eat it, but not in the Thatcher Shrine Room. No. If you've got a dining table, I'll come there.
Would you pay £30 for a take? It's effectively
for a ready meal.
Ready meal.
A ready meal
for you and your other half. Would you pay £30 for it?
No,
and that doesn't include a wine gum of alcohol.
Some people have very little sense. Some people are easily parted with their money, and I suppose the political point. It's a sign of the great inequality in modern Britain, initiated by Margaret Thatcher.
And dear people, viewers and listeners, Kevin Maguire said some people have little sense and some people are very easy to part with their money. Which one of those two do you think he is? Yes, he has little sense. We'll see you next week.
Bye.